Was J.R.R. Tolkien a prophet? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. We've been hearing a great deal lately about J.R.R. Tolkien and his work. To be specific, Amazon Prime has its new streaming series, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. That series does not do justice to Tolkien or his work. I'm going to talk about why not, but also show how J.R.R. Tolkien was a prophet, though he never asked for that role. He has, in fact, anticipated both the treatment of his work in recent days and some of the most disturbing political and social trends in Western society today. Now you know why I have changed the pace this morning. After all, a review of a popular culture franchise is something new for this channel. Well, I ask you all to pay attention because popular culture reflects social morals, mores, and programs. If you recognize in the larger society any evil thing Tolkien described in his work, you will know why I call him a prophet. And as I intend to show, that includes this latest project, and not only how the producers have butchered it, but why they have butchered it and what they hope to gain by such butchery. Before I begin, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views, link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom of that link. Lots of great merchandise there, including this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which depicts an even older prophet, Plato, who famously said, "No one is more hated than he who speaks the truth." And one more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can even click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click on that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do. Now, our brief lesson in English literature with an illustration of its relevance for our time. J.R.R. Tolkien was a professor of English languages and literature at Oxford University, and in all his scholarship, he noticed early that the English never had the kind of colorful mythology of their own origin or of an ancient civilization that the Greeks had and the Romans copied, or that the Norse peoples had. The Russians had one too, but few people outside of Russia even know about it. So J.R.R. Tolkien sought to fill that gap. The result, most of you know. The Hobbit in 1 volume, and The Lord of the Rings in 3. Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, The Return of the King. His original publishers were George Allen and Unwin in the UK, but they arranged for an American publisher, Houghton Mifflin, which exists today as Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, to publish his work on this side of the pond. Houghton Mifflin also authorized this compendium of short stories and notes called the Tolkien Reader. Now notice the cover art. Except for the Tolkien Reader, The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings has cover art by Tolkien himself. See? He didn't just create a story universe, he illustrated it too. Now, not many authors have that kind of talent. Now, all these tales existed only as literature while Tolkien was still alive, except for 3 animated cartoons. No motion picture projects have come to pass until 2001, and that's the year that producer Peter Jackson brought Tolkien's rich world to life and in fact made it even richer. And as you'll see, that's probably the last decent treatment Tolkien's works ever got. Now, I don't know how many of you know that his influence reached further than this. Before Peter Jackson created his trilogy that set the record for Academy Awards in one project, a record that still stands, by the way. Before Saul Zaentz created his serious cartoon adaptation of the first half of the events of The Lord of the Rings. And in the same year, 1977, that Arthur Rankin Jr. and Jules Bass gave The Hobbit their trademark musical comedy cartoon treatment, The Lord of the Rings did come to film in outer space. The name of the film project was, of course, Star Wars. Oh, come now, you knew this already. In Obi-Wan Kenobi, dressed up as an old hermit, you get Gandalf the Grey. In R2-D2 and C-3PO, you get Frodo and Sam, the two hobbits that became all that was left of the Fellowship of the Ring. Luke Skywalker makes a very young version of Aragorn, or maybe Captain Faramir of Ithilien. The Death Star is Barad-dûr and Mount Doom rolled into one gigantic and fearsome whole. And the Death Star plans are the one ring to rule them all. Not a perfect analogy, as such analogies never are, but close enough. And in that same year, Christopher Tolkien, that's J.R.R.'s son, brought out this compendium of Tolkien's scattered notes that set the scene for the tales he published during his lifetime. Young Christopher called this compendium the Silmarillion. This is Houghton Mifflin's original hardback edition. I bought this when I was attending Yale College. Look at this cover illustration. Yep, you guessed it, J.R.R. Tolkien drew that too. Let's see, now this could be any of a number of mountain ranges that Frodo and Sam had to cross when the Fellowship got down to just to them. Or it could be any mountains that anybody across in the era of this book. Now, here's the thing. No evidence survives that the elder Tolkien ever asked his son to publish this book. In fact, my fellow influencer, Dictor Van Doomcock, totally disputes that notion, though he might or might not have read Christopher Tolkien's preface saying that he did have authorization. Well, that's a dispute for another time. You need to know that the Silmarillion is the source material for all of Tolkien's novels and short stories. It even contains a creation of the world story with which any comprehensive mythology must begin. Anyone reading the Silmarillion after reading The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings will find in it the origins of the characters and situations and the background for many of the reminiscences into which the characters routinely fall. That rich background enabled Tolkien to develop his characters as nothing else could have. From the Silmarillion especially, one can readily see that Tolkien, a devout Christian, created a mythology more like the Bible story than any other Western mythological structure. It has one true God, variously called Eru and Ilúvatar. That's Ilúvatar. And that's a name that's supposed to mean Father of all. This Ilúvatar created the other powers to serve him, the same as the God we know created various categories of spirit beings, which we call angels, to serve him. One of these powers, Melkor by name, Ilúvatar invested with more power than the rest, but power corrupts, as Lord Acton said, and as Tolkien understood. Like Lucifer, Melkor aimed at the divine throne, and became instead the enemy of Ilúvatar and all his works. Also like Lucifer, Melkor can never create, he can only distort. That also applied to his lieutenant and understudy, Sauron. These two could lie without shame and charm almost anyone. And like Satan, they leverage greed, power hunger, and other lusts. The only sort of person Tolkien did not create was a redeemer. Now, his good friend C.S. Lewis created such a person in his own mythological parallel world of Narnia. Now, if you stuck with me this long, it gets better. I want to talk about the motion picture treatments of Tolkien's work and certain modern-day practices that sound disturbingly like some of the evils Tolkien describes. Before I dive into that, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You're not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But If you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Now, maybe you just want to collect rare and unique coins, or you're a genuine entrepreneur. You're looking for business opportunities? This company's got them. Either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Now, we left off with what Tolkien created. We turn now to the motion picture treatments. Now, at first, the American motion picture and television industries treated The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, at least passively. Rankin and Bass achieved complete faithfulness because Tolkien wrote The Hobbit for 8-year-old boys. Rankin and Bass simply gave their special the same tone Tolkien uses in his original novel, which is the tone they used all the time. In fact, I'll let you in a little secret. Rankin and Bass didn't have to compose any lyrics for their musical numbers. J.R.R. Tolkien had already done that. You'll find them in The Hobbit. Rankin and Bass set them to music, that's all. And very good music it was. I remember watching that special when it came out, and that's how I know. The Lord of the Rings is a lot different in tone. Tolkien wrote these novels for adolescent boys. Saul Zaent's project took the same tone. So did George Lucas when he created Star Wars, using many of the same story elements, but not all. You don't get Saruman unless you would put Darth Vader in that role. That's just one example, but I digress. Peter Jackson, beginning in 2001, changed the tone. He created movies for adults. Not that he appealed to any prurient interest, but he told the stories on an adult level. In boys' stories, the adult men whom the main characters meet along the way are already sure of themselves. Whether they fight for good or for evil, they've been waiting for the main characters to come along, and they're pumped up and raring to go. Oh, well, when you tell a story on an adult level, you don't do things that way because it doesn't work out that way in real life. Instead, every potential ally has certain issues with which they must deal. Which is why, for example, the future King Aragorn does not appear to Frodo and company with all his self-doubts fully resolved and ready to take command and lead Frodo to safety. Aragorn must grow into his role and resolve his doubts when the crisis comes to him. That is how real leaders must lead. But our crisis catches every leader unprepared to at least some degree. And alliances aren't always easy to form. Peter Jackson's take on the Council of Elrond has representatives of the free peoples, for lack of a better term, openly squabbling until Frodo stands up and says, "Wait, I'll take the ring if someone will show me the way." Now, I certainly forgive Peter Jackson for changing the tone. He made Aragorn, the other fellows of the ring, and other characters they meet along the way much more believable. And more to the point, Peter Jackson never changed the essentials of the world Tolkien created, nor of human nature. The only objectionable change Jackson made, and he probably did it because he had to save time, was that he cut out the mini-war that Frodo, Samwise, Peregrine, and Meriadoc need to fight when they return home and fight it overrun by gangsters answering to, well, to Saruman. But I do not forgive the latest treatment Amazon Prime Productions gave to the Silmarillion. Again, I come back to Dictor Van Doomkart, who has been reviewing the Rings of Power series. I gather it tells a version of events of the second and third ages of Middle-earth that one simply will not recognize in the Silmarillion. Characters pursuing the cause of justice, especially male characters, act uncharacteristically stupidly. Part of this DVD puts down to bad writing, but the other part is an attempt to change human nature. So he says, and I agree with that. Like Kathleen Kennedy at Lucasfilm, and I've seen her awful sequel trilogy. The producers of The Rings of Power are trying to show that men are worse than superfluous and women must rule. But this illustrates a profound thread Tolkien wove throughout his work during his lifetime and stated explicitly in the Silmarillion. Evil cannot create. It can only distort. This applies equally to the evil powers Tolkien created and to how Amazon is now treating his work. You thought I'd never get to relating Tolkien to real life, did you? Well, here goes. Remember Melkor? He produced the orcs, that goblin-like infantry and labor force that served him and later Sauron. How did he do it? By kidnapping some of the earliest elves and subjecting them to slow arts of cruelty. Now, what those are, I have no idea. Tolkien never explained. I'll let you guess. In a later age, wicked wizard Saruman blended the races of orcs and men. Now, if Tolkien knew of Nazi experiments in blending the species of gorilla and Homo sapiens, he never said. But did Tolkien anticipate the program to achieve sexual interchangeability through psychological, hormonal, and surgical manipulation? Again, he never said. But the orc breeding program sounds a lot like it, except for one thing. The products of this treatment are uniformly sterile. That wasn't true of the orcs. Now, don't believe the woke crowd when they tell you that any of their subjects remain fertile. They're either trying to deceive you or they've deceived themselves along that line. Likewise, Kathleen Kennedy and her Rings of Power counterparts cannot create on their own. They can only distort what others have created to produce their own twisted version of male-female relations. Why are they doing this? Because they want to rob boys of every element in popular culture that shows them how to be men. They're the kind of women who have been making war on boys since at least the 90s and probably earlier. At least the Greeks were more honest. They conceived of the Amazons, a warrior culture with women in charge. These modern-day Amazons are projecting worlds in which men make nothing but mistakes and women make no mistakes. But I hear some of you say, well, what about Eowyn passing for a man, falling in with Merry Brandybuck, a stowaway who was even more out of place in that army? And then the two of them killing Captain Ringwraith? All right, Tolkien did write that scene, and it is one of his best. But that is a clear exception, which he treats as such. In the new Forces female worlds of Disney Star Wars and Amazon Middle-earth, such things are the norm. And in fact, there is no little boy to help the woman out at a critical moment, as Mary does in that scene. And by the way, let me clear up any confusion before it starts. Jeff Bezos named his company for the Amazon River in Brazil, a river of books. But his newest hires seem to have decided, with his consent or even connivance, to make Amazon mean the fabled women ruling, women warrior culture. But there's more. The Rings of Power have their own analogues in technological advances that perhaps humans should not pursue. More than a century before Tolkien, Mary Shelley sounded the same warning in her novel Frankenstein. The medical profession and other professions heap scorn on such warnings. They begin with efforts to enable the blind to see, the deaf to hear, the lame to walk, on and on and on. Now, who could object to that? Well, that's what they say. But what they're doing is trying to improve on the human form in ways neither Shelley nor Tolkien ever dared imagine. Except that these would not be improvements at all, but a new kind of slave chain. That is, when they're not practicing thoroughly bad medicine, as my contributor John Anthony has repeatedly stated. So, in many ways, J.R.R. Tolkien was a prophet, as Mary Shelley was. They sounded clear warnings. You think maybe we should listen? Link in the description of the article and the conservative news and views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to our silverlives.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and to some of DVD's reviews of that awful Rings of Power series, and maybe also of what's been happening to Star Wars, and for the same kind of reason. And by the way, DVD is one of my favorite featured channels. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.